and amongst the corporates themselves. And therefore, you're probably finding a lot more credit going back into companies.
All right. Mr. Sethi, you must be discussing with, a lot of companies for sure, small, medium. The definitions may vary, but yes, you may be discussing with a lot of companies. What's the sense that you get? Are companies becoming more confident? Is there something that they share in terms of the kind of lessons that they've learned, per se, in the last 6 to 12 months? Some nagging problems or something that they've been able to overcome with greater degree of conviction as well?
Okay, let's say two things. One is the index of industrial production, which March 2009 showed us the worst. It was a negative 2.3%, which the January quarter showed us more than 16%. So this is the official indicator of saying that industrial production is doing well, or there is a turnaround. But the first question when you ask me, medium or mid-size, whatever the definition we might be taking, how much of them were really affected by the global financial crisis, the word used here. So I would like to say that it was a very small percentage in our country which was really affected. The others got a psychological effect, which probably when you say, when they talk about credit, they talk about market, they talk about infrastructure, the issues have not changed so much in this 1 year. The issues that have changed really is that psychological thing that India as a market, the incentivization system that goes on, the credit channels that they have, it is not something that really got affected too much. So when you say what are these companies saying, what I'm trying to tell you is that 2009 was very bad, but they could come out fast because a lot of those real factors remained the same, where there was an added focus on incentivizing some of these units, having better channels for credit, and having a focus on infrastructure, on skill development.
It's a bit of a surprise, simply because, the companies that we interact to, even on a daily basis on air as well, and when they have come out in 2009 and said that they are facing serious problems in terms of access to cash, so on and so forth, I'm guessing that the smaller companies would have even aggravated problems.
In fact, when you say smaller, the definitional issue, of course, is there.
Sure.
I define medium also as 5 to 10 crores, because
so I'm sure those companies also have some
the
problems.
MSME Act says 5 to 10 crores is medium. But if we say mid-sized is anything ahead of 100 crores or 200 crores,
sure.
These are the companies. In fact, in our state, we have a scheme of mega projects. So mega projects is about fixed capital investment or the employment. So there is a certain example where the investment is just 25 crores, but we call them a mega project.
Sure.
Why? Because the employment is more than 500.
Sure.
Now, these kind of companies, when you say, were they not facing a problem? I'm saying, well, they certainly were facing a problem,
sure.
But in the last 6 to 9 months, a lot of them have started commercial production.
Sure.
And when I try and analyze it, that were there real constraints? My personal opinion is that there were some constraints, but probably it got aggravated by the psyche of this crisis.
Dr.
That's
Gupta,
what
you
my
would agree with that? Did you face...
I agree with him to the extent that there is more of psychology that people have at the time of crisis.
Sure.
According to me, the crisis or the depression is normally faced with depression, whereas what is required is
I agree.
aggression.
That aside, what I'm just trying to say is, in actual terms, factual terms, did you face some problems? How did you, what is it that you faced and something that got addressed?
Well, we did face problem on less sales,
sure.
Market size shrinking, but then instead of facing this by depression, we felt let us come out with the best, have the best talent in the
sure.
industry, have the best product, and not just compared with the domestic market, but the international market, because all the international players were coming into India.
Sure.
So we had to compete with them, and they wanted the best in comparison to the Indian players.
Sure.
So therefore, we went all out with the bank. And banks also, I feel, sometimes they also face with depression rather than aggression.
Sure.
And I feel if the banks also are aggressive in these times and help all out the industries, the industries can do very well. And that is what happened with me.
I'll come to you for sure, but Puneet, you want to respond to that?
Just 1 minute. I'll give you figures of RBI just to prove the point that I'm saying.
Sure.
Right. See, 2008, this is the sectoral deployment of gross bank credit. So this is 866,875 crores, right? Which increased from a 697,339. So this is 2007, 2008. In 2009, it is 10,54,390 crores. So I'm talking about industry as a whole in this country,
Sure.
which does not segregate between mid-size, large, etc. What I'm saying is that in the last 3 years, the growth of the sectoral deployment of gross bank credit remains almost the same. The growth rates are the same. So when you say there were sectors that were affected, there was a particular kind of industry that was affected, but when you try to generalize it, I'm saying maybe there was a lot more than saying credit is the only villain. That's what I'm trying to say.
Puneet, two
Well,
responses.
I think it's fair to say that banks were more circumspect because there was uncertainty. There was uncertainty around the cash flows. There was uncertainty around capital markets. You had projects that were incomplete, projects that had probably not tied up the full funding that they needed. There were companies that had access to financing from perhaps the mutual fund industry, a source which was drying up very quickly. So I think yes, I would agree that at the time of the crisis, the banks were more careful. They were taking time to understand the companies that they needed to support. And they also were very keen to understand the end use of the money that was being extended. Because if this was going to go and repay somebody else's financing, then that wasn't going to really help the company.
Yeah, but the industry is complaining that even otherwise the banks don't come out and support in the full measure.
I think that probably is not a view that I would share. I think there are certain sectors which are probably over-leveraged, overheated, perhaps the real estate sector. And I think you can have two different views. You know, you can have an optimistic view from the sector, and the banking sector might view that to be a more risky prospect to bank relative to some of the others that might be on the anvil. So I don't think, I mean, at the end of the day, banks are in the business of lending money, taking risk. You know, that's the core opportunity that they have to fulfill. But yes, they will be circumspect at times when there's heightened perception of risk.
And rightly so. I must say that the PSU bankers are saying that the last 6 months they have seen a lot of disbursement growth that they've seen. I'll just come to you as well. But Mr. Karia, just wondering, your experience, I mean, the last 12 months, has there been a lot of hiccup that you've seen in the last 12 months, and is it easing out? Any particular bottlenecks that you are still facing?
Well, the electrical industry as such in India is facing a slowdown. And, you know, the sector that I come from, that is the cable segment, constitutes almost about 30% of the electrical industry. And we are seeing a negative growth. It's not come out of the doldrums as yet. Something to do with maybe the governmental policies as far as the increase in capex for the power sector goes, something to do with the increase in the generation. Because year before last we had only about 3,200 megawatts of power, increase in generation as of March 2008. So that catches up somewhere, and I think it just happened at a time when we had, the financial crisis, as well as the fact that the government had not done enough for the power sector, and therefore the electrical sector got badly impacted during that time. Of course, the electrical sector is also very dependent on exports. So we had the exports quite badly affected. At the same time, imports increased. So I think it was something to do with a little bit of everything.
Sure.